Okay, we're live, everybody. Good morning. Welcome back. We're back with week 2 of our level 1 vocational studies course, where we're looking at understanding and eventually overcoming some barriers that we face to our own health and well-being, be that stuff that gets in the way of exercise, stuff that gets in the way of eating right and making good food choices as well, and trying to get a balanced, healthy diet. Because we all know the benefits. We all know exercise is good for us, fruit and veg is good for us, but there's stuff that gets in the way, guys, and it's not as easy as just saying, right, just ignore that and eat veg or get 8 hours sleep a night or whatever it might be. It's not always that simple. We do face barriers, and it pays to talk about them and explore them, and I'll maybe even be able to give a little bit of advice from my experience as a personal trainer, where I've worked with clients before and helped them work around stuff as well. So that's the sort of thing that we are gearing up towards. Of course, we're exploring lots of different areas to do with health and fitness and our own well-being as well. Last week we looked at the skeleton, so we started to lay the foundation and understanding the human body a little bit more, because I think the better we understand the human body or our own bodies, the easier it is to look after it and sort of understand the choices that we make and the impact that that's going to have on the body, be those choices positive or negative. I think understanding how the body works, how it moves, we can start to see how those choices will have consequences, either for the better or for the worse. And today we're going to be looking at the heart, in conjunction with some of the other muscles in the body, because the heart is a muscle itself. The heart is its own type of muscle, actually. So we have 3 different types of muscle in the body. We have cardiac muscle, which is the heart. We have skeletal muscle, which is what we're going to be looking at this morning as well. Skeletal muscle is the muscle that is attached to our skeleton via tendons and helps us move. Yeah, these are the muscles that we, have direct control over. They're the ones that you might be, trying to work and develop while we're doing different exercises, be it pecs, abs, glutes, your thigh muscles, your calves, whatever it might be. That's all skeletal muscle. And then we have smooth muscle, which is stuff like our blood vessels and our organs and stuff like that. It's still muscle, and all these different types of muscle are different in their own ways. Now, say we're going to jump in with the heart, and we're actually going to do our own diagram, or you guys are going to do your own diagram. So we'll give it a minute or two. Go grab yourself a pen and a bit of paper, ideally 2 pens if you've got them, because we need 2 different colors. You'll see why shortly, but even a pen and a pencil will do. Like I say, felt tips, even crayons if you've got crayons kicking about, just 2 different colors, just so we can mark out 2 different parts of this cycle that we're going to look at. So the job of the heart, really, it's a muscle, but I think of it really above everything else, it's a pump. Our heart is a pump that, just like you would have a pump in a swimming pool or something like that, or in a garden pond to help circulate water. The heart's exactly the same, but it's circulating blood instead. It needs to circulate this blood to get oxygen around the body, because your blood carries oxygen. It picks up oxygen from your lungs when you breathe in and delivers this oxygen to all your muscles and all your organs and your brain and stuff like that, everywhere that needs oxygen. So that's what the heart's job is, to keep pumping the blood around the body. Yeah, so that's the cycle that we're going to be looking at. Like I say, we breathe in, oxygen comes into our lungs, and then that oxygen gets passed into our bloodstream, which gets pumped around our body, by our heart, which might be beating, anywhere probably between 60 to maybe 100, 120 beats per minute, at rest. So before we do jump into it, if you do want to get an idea for how hard your heart is working or how fast it's pumping, you can actually check your own heart rate. You don't need any fancy kit from the doctors or anything like that. What you can do, you can take your 2 fingers and put them on your wrist, where you can feel a little bit of a pulse, a little bit of a beat. and then count how many times does it beat in 60 seconds. You can just set a timer away on your phone. You know, I even set it away for 30 seconds, time 30 seconds, count how many pulses you get and double it for your 60. So that's your beats per minute. Yeah, and you can get an idea how many times your heart is beating per minute, because that is what it's doing. And that is why when we exercise, our heart rate speeds up. The demand for oxygen from our muscles is more. So the heart works harder to pump the blood faster. Yeah, so that is what the heart's doing. It's essentially forcing the blood around your body due to pressure, which is what your blood pressure is. And it does, it forces the blood through your veins, through your arteries, gets the oxygen to where it needs to be, and then it comes back and starts the cycle all over again. Okay, guys, cool. So if you've got your pen and paper, we're going to crack on. If you need another 30 seconds or another couple of minutes or whatever, just pause the video here and just unpause it and catch up when you've got everything that you need. But yeah, just a piece of paper and probably 2 pens will do you at the minute, 2 different colored pens. And what we're going to do, we're going to draw our own diagram really of the heart in a much more simple way to help us visualize the different sections of the heart, you know, the structure of it, and how the blood actually moves around the body as well. Of course, it's not going to look like a photorealistic heart, but again, it just keeps it nice and simple, and we can understand how things are working and how things are happening. So let's get started then, guys. So for step 1, I'm just going to make this a little bit bigger for you. Okay, so for step 1, we've got 4 equally sized boxes. Yeah, so we've drawn one big box or one big rectangle, divided it into 4. And if you notice that the wall or the line down the middle is thicker, and that is called the septum. So what we've drawn there, guys, is the heart as it would look if this bit of paper was, you know, representing a heart that's in the chest of somebody that you're looking at. Yeah, so imagine this is somebody that you're looking at. You look down to where their chest is, where their rib cage is, and you use X-ray vision to look through. This is how we would see their heart, you know, in a sense, anyway, in terms of structure, anyway, and how it's laid out. So we've got 2 boxes at the top and 2 boxes at the bottom, and there's a big thick line that divides one side from the other, and that wall is called the septum. Just the same as the septum in our nose that separates one nostril from the other. That's a septum as well. Maybe you've heard of a septum piercing, which goes through the nose, not the bridge of the nose, but sort of like might be a ring. So that's the septum, and it is keeping one side separate from the other, and we'll come to understand why that's so important as we move through these next steps. So we've got our 4 rooms, or our 4 chambers. So these are the 4 different chambers of the heart. Yeah. Okay, then. So let's. Before we move on to step 2, I'll just point out at the top we've got cardiorespiratory system. Sounds like a big old fancy word. I guess it is a big old fancy word. It is just to do with your heart and your lungs. Yeah, cardio is to do with the heart. You know, when you do cardiovascular exercise, when you do cardio, it's working your heart and your lungs. And of course, respiratory is to do with breathing as well. So we know that we've got the lungs involved there as well. So all we're looking at, this system, this cardiorespiratory system, is just your heart and your lungs working together to bring in oxygen to the body and get where it needs to be, really. And that is what that's what we're focusing on. Okay, guys, cool. So assuming everybody's had time to get that copied down onto your own little diagram in front of you. Again, if I ever move on a little bit quick, of course, if you're watching along in the live chat, just tell me to slow down a little bit if you want. If you're watching along later on in the week, once we're not live anymore, then by all means, just pause it as and when you need to. If I'm moving on a little bit before you're ready to, just pause it. Okay, guys, so step 2, we're going on to label the left-hand side and the right-hand side. But what you might notice is that we've actually got them the reverse way around. And again, think about this as a heart that is in the chest of somebody and the two of you are face to face. They're looking at you. So where it says left, that's their left. If you turn around and face the other way, your left is the same direction. Yeah, if that makes sense. Also, if you were to pick up this bit of paper, turn it round and away from you and put it on your chest, this would be the left-hand side and this would be the right. Yeah, so it would line up properly. So this is a heart that we're looking at. So that is their left and their right, not ours. So what we've done there, we've split up the left from the right, and we can see that the septum is dividing the left side from the right, and with good reason, which we'll get a look at in a second. So we've got our right-hand side and we've got our left-hand side labelled in both of those boxes. Yeah, just keeping those sides separate, nice and clearly labelled. And then we're going to add a little bit more detail on the next slide to just differentiate these 4 chambers a little bit more. So these chambers are just representing empty spaces within your heart that the blood flows through at different stages of this system, or this never-ending cycle, really, that we're looking at. We have roughly about 10 pints of blood in the human body that is constantly being recycled and is constantly going through this system of pick up oxygen, drop it off at our muscles, or anywhere it's needed. Yeah, then pick up oxygen, drop it off again. Pretty fascinating when you think that they might do that for 60, 70, 80, 90 years plus, maybe. You know, really interesting stuff. Okay then, guys, so we're going to move on to step 3. Step 3, like I say, giving a bit more detail to those chambers. So we can see we've got at the top of each side, we have an atrium. So we have the right atrium and the left atrium. And then same again in the bottom 2 chambers, we have a right ventricle and a left ventricle. Yeah. So we've got atrium at the top, ventricle at the bottom. The way that I tend to remember that, if you've ever come across or heard of an atrium in a building, an atrium is a open roofed building or room. It's open topped, and the top of the atrium is where the blood flows in, which we'll be looking at in just a second. So the blood flows in through the top of the atrium. So in a way, this top chamber is open topped. Yeah, otherwise there'd be no way for it to flow into it. So we've got the atrium at the top and we've got the ventricle at the bottom, so you might even think, okay, it flows in at the top one, I can't remember what that one's called, and then it trickles down into the next one, into the next chamber. So ventricle at the bottom, atrium at the top, and we've got one on either side. Yeah. Okay, cool. So just while I'll give you a second to make sure we've got that down. Right. Just going to load up this week's workbook so I can share it across in a little bit. And just get a look at what exercises we're going to be doing in between now and next week's session. Okay, cool. So if everybody's got that one down, we're going to move on to step 4 then. So step 4. So what we're going to try and do now, we're going to try and what we've done so far really is we've drawn the layout of the heart in a pretty simple style, really. So now to think about, okay, how does the blood come into the heart? Where does it come from? Where does it go when it leaves? In what order? So we're going to actually start trying to get an idea of the way that the blood flows around the body. Yeah, so in order to do that, we've got our 2 boxes that we've drawn on the left and right hand side here. So on the right hand side, we've got a box that says lungs. And of course, that is that is indicating the step or the part of the process where oxygen is passed into the bloodstream. Yeah, it happens in the lungs. Yeah, so we know that blood needs to get to and from our lungs. Yeah, so we've got one box for the lungs, and then over here we've got body. Yeah, that is the part of the process where the oxygen is being delivered to wherever it needs to be. Yeah, so of course the lungs and the heart would normally be within the body. Yeah, of course, but just again help us visualize and just picture in our mind how the blood moves around the body. We have the body offers its own separate box to the left hand side, and like I say, that is when the blood is being delivered to everywhere that it needs to be. Yeah, that could say muscles, organs, whatever it might be. That's just the oxygen going to where it needs to be, really. So we've just added those two boxes: body on the left, lungs on the right hand side, and then we can start to fill in some of the missing bits. Okay, step 5 then. Step 5, moving on. So step 5, we're adding a little bit of color. So we're going to either use the first of your two colored pens or pencils or whatever, or if you want to, for now, you can just keep it the same color that you've drawn the heart in. Really, I guess if you've only got two colors and you've drawn the heart in red or whatever, if you want to use red for this next step, you can as well. Just make sure we've got a different color for the next step that we're going to look at. So because this cycle is it's ongoing, like I say, from the moment that we're born, really, or even beforehand, to the moment that our heart stops beating. This is a process that is ongoing. So there's no real start or end to the process for us to say this is a natural place to jump in and follow the process from here and see what happens. There is no step 1 really. So we've picked our own place where we're going to start following this journey. And that's going to be at the lungs, because that is where the oxygen is handed over, of course, from your lungs into your blood. So that is the first time your blood is carrying oxygen in this cycle. Yeah, at this step, this side of the lungs, this is the first time our blood is carrying oxygen. Yeah, so it's oxygenated blood, as we've marked in the K on the left hand side. So we've got oxygenated blood is marked by this red color. So we know that oxygenated blood is blood that is carrying oxygen, so it has a job to do in delivering that oxygen to the body. Yeah, this blood here needs to be here everywhere else in the body, really. Yeah, so like I mentioned earlier on, the only way it can get there is because of blood pressure and our heart. Our heart is that pump. Our heart pumps the blood around the body through pressure and force. It's the same reason that blood is able to get up into our neck and into our brain and stuff like that, because gravity normally wouldn't allow that. Blood's a liquid. Water doesn't run upwards, and neither does blood. It is the pure pressure from your heart that is forcing the blood through your veins and through your arteries, that is able to get that blood distributed to where it needs to be. And again, maybe if you've ever seen in a movie or a TV show or whatever, when somebody cuts an artery, it'll spurt, and sometimes it looks quite cartoonish sometimes, and sometimes it looks a little bit OTT, but that is actually what would happen. Your heart would pump, the blood would go to fly through your veins or your arteries, and if your artery is exposed, it's going to fly out and it's going to spurt, and the same is going to happen again next time your heart pumps and the next time your heart pumps. So we've got quite a lot of blood pressure in our system, and that is what helps this blood get around. So if the blood wants to be at the body and the muscles and everywhere else in the body that it needs to be, it needs to go to the pump, it needs to go to the heart first. Yeah, it needs that little bit of a boost. almost like hitting a speed ramp on Mario Kart or Crash Team Racing or something. You know, if you played a video game and you hit a little speed boost, that's what we're doing as the blood's going through the heart, gets that little bit of pressure, and is forced around your body. Fun little tip, fun little fact before we do move on. When we're thinking about gravity and this blood pressure, if we had no blood pressure at all, you know, of course, we try and stay away from high blood pressure. But if we had no blood pressure, all of our blood would just settle in our lower half in our limbs because of gravity. Yeah, so that's what our blood pressure is doing, really, forcing this blood around our body. So the blood comes to the heart first. As I mentioned earlier on, it comes into the top of the left atrium because the left atrium, or the atriums in general, are open topped. There is a vein or an artery, there's a blood vessel that attaches to the top of this chamber that the blood can flow into. So the blood comes into here, and this left atrium is the first place that the oxygenated blood goes. Yeah? It then passes through a little valve down into the left ventricle. And the reason that we have these valves is to make sure that the blood only flows one way. Yeah? Because the heart is a pump, as it squeezes, it forces the blood out and into the arteries. But when it expands again, in order to be able to squeeze again, it has to expand every time. That would normally create a little bit of like a vacuum and a little bit of sort of like a sucking the blood backwards effect, which of course we don't want. This blood's got a job to do. We know that the job is to get to the body. We don't want it, you know, getting pushed forward, then getting pushed back, then getting pushed forward, and getting pushed back. So what we have is valves at various sort of places around the human body and in our blood vessels, not just necessarily within the heart. But we have these little valves that allow the blood to pass through in a one direction sort of way. So then the blood is into the left ventricle. Yeah. So then the pressure of the heart contracting or squeezing or pumping, however you want to think about it, forces the blood out because there's nowhere for it to go. Exactly as if you had, if you've got a little cup of water and you crush the cup, the water is going to go elsewhere, and the blood gets forced out into your arteries, yeah, or into a main artery which branches off into lots of different arteries. So this is our blood vessels. This is our transport, or our highway and our roads to get the blood to where it needs to be. You know, be it our toes, our calves, our thighs, shoulders, neck, head, brain, whatever it may be. It all needs oxygen, so it all needs a route for oxygen to get there. So we've kept it nice and simple, one big arrow. So the blood goes from the left ventricle, so the left-hand side of the heart is done with the blood. It gets forced out, round to the body, does its job, drops it all off. Yeah? Cool. Right, so making sure that we've got, you know, those little bits coloured in, everything marked out that we've added on that slide, and we've followed the blood flow so far from the lungs all the way around to the part where it drops the blood off, the oxygen off, sorry. So job done, right? You'd be thinking job done. The oxygen's done what it needs to do. And if, you know, our blood and our blood cells were single use, that would be the case. But think about it as a like a delivery driver. You know, think about it like an Amazon delivery driver or something like that. Gets to the end of the day, he's dropped off all of his parcels. What's he got to do? He's got to get back to HQ. He's got to pick up the next lot, pick up your next lot of delivery. Yeah, so that is exactly what the blood's got to do as well. It has to make its way back to the lungs to pick up oxygen again. Yeah, the blood, as it delivered its oxygen, so it no longer has any. So it needs to go and pick up some more. So what we get now is deoxygenated blood. This is oxygen that isn't, this is blood, sorry, that isn't carrying any oxygen. So this is what our second color was for, yeah, or our pencil or our second pen or whatever it was. This is what our different color is going to be for, to just keep this oxygenated blood and deoxygenated blood separate or quite nice and clearly marked, and you can easily tell which is which. So yeah, now we've got our deoxygenated blood, which again needs to make its way back up to the lungs. So it goes to the heart first. Yeah, it goes to the heart first to get pumped back to the lungs. Yeah, so in order to complete the cycle, we go through the heart one more time and then back to the lungs. So there's almost like, it's quite funny really that it goes on indefinitely throughout our lives, when the whole cycle really looks like, moves like an infinity sign, really, you know. So we've got our deoxygenated blood again into the right atrium. So anytime blood enters the heart, we can see it's coming in to the top chamber. And when it leaves the heart, no matter where it's going, it leaves the bottom chamber. So in at the top, out at the bottom. Yeah. Same again, we've got valves to keep it a one-way system. Then the blood gets squeezed back round to the lungs. And then this blood is able to not fill the lungs, but it passes through the wall of the lungs and picks up more oxygen. Yeah. Picks up more oxygen from within the lungs. And that is how it ends up in our system again, in our bloodstream. So we then have oxygenated blood again. Yeah. So we've been into the lungs, picked up the oxygen that's just come in fresh with our last breath, or last breaths, and we become oxygenated again. So, like I say, the blood is either going to one of two places. It's either going to the body to drop off oxygen, or it's going to the lungs to pick up some more oxygen. Yeah. And in between each one, it stops off at the heart to get pumped. Yeah, the heart pumps it again. Yeah. Okay then, cool. So what we actually start to see now as well, coming back to this septum in the middle, this wall that divides the right hand side from the left, we can now, you know, see a little bit more about what it's doing, what job it's doing. It's not just separating the right side from the left, it's separating the the deoxygenated blood from the oxygenated blood, which makes a lot of sense when you think each have their own different job to be doing, which requires them to be pumped to a totally different place in the body. Yeah. If this is allowed to mix, you've got some deoxygenated blood coming across into this side. So when the blood pumps oxygenated blood, or what should be oxygenated blood, round to the body, you've got muscles there that are waiting on their oxygen delivery, but the blood has just passed straight through into this side without going to the lungs again. Yeah, so potentially a percentage of the blood that's getting pumped around the body that should be carrying oxygen isn't. Yeah, so you get fatigued really quickly, you get tired really quickly, because muscles and stuff that should be getting oxygen aren't. They're struggling to function. They're going to want to shut down a lot quicker. Yeah, you might get dizzy. Yeah, you're not getting enough oxygen to the brain, to the mind. And then you've got the flip side of things as well. You might have blood that is oxygenated that needs to be here, getting sent around to the body like we just talked about, but it will come across the other way. It'll flow into here and it'll get pumped around to the lungs again. And there's no need for it to. It's a waste. It's wasted energy from a survival point of view, thinking it from like a biological point of view as well. It's wasted energy pumping blood that is already carrying oxygen to the lungs. It needs to be everywhere but the lungs. Yeah, the lungs is the last place that it needs to be. It's carrying oxygen. It's got no reason to be there. So we actually end up with this sort of blood quality mixing. And yeah, if you have a hole in this wall, which is a condition that some people do experience and live with, you're going to have these effects. Now, some of what can cause this wall to break down and start to degrade a little bit, it can be genetic, but some of it can be lifestyle choices as well. So when it comes to exercise, our heart is a muscle like anything else. The more we work it, the more efficient and to an extent, the stronger it becomes. And coming back to that beat per minute thing, the stronger your heart is, the less effort it needs to put in, especially while we're not sitting around and doing anything. So somebody who's really used to intense exercise and their heart is used to working at that increased level of intensity, when they're just sitting around like I am right now, their heart might only be beating 40 times a minute, because what it's used to dealing with, this is a piece of cake. Your heart becomes efficient. So being fitter doesn't just help you when you need to exercise and you need to move and stuff like that. Being fitter actually helps all the time, because it takes the strain off your heart. It can take some of the strain off your heart and how hard your heart needs to work, especially while we're just sitting around not doing very much. So again, just one of the many benefits of getting our exercise in, and thinking of our heart as something that's just as important as abs, and being low body fat and the sort of stuff that we do get hung up with in the health and fitness industry these days. Say a lot of people worry about the muscles that you can see in the mirror and not so much about the ones that you can't see, whereas it's those ones that are keeping us going. Our lungs, our heart, they need strengthening as well. Okay, guys, so we've got one last little step just to add on to the end of this, and that is just to label some of these main blood vessels, I guess, some of these main sort of routes of transport for the blood and the way it makes its way around the body. So we've labeled the 4 biggest ones. Yeah. So as we come out of the lungs, and we're carrying oxygenated blood, we have got the pulmonary vein. Yeah, so the pulmonary vein takes oxygenated blood to the left atrium. Yeah. The aorta is the main artery that the blood leaves the heart to go to the body. Yeah. So the heart squeezes and contracts, and then the blood is squeezed out through the aorta, which, like I mentioned earlier, it starts as one artery passageway, I guess. Starts as one and then branches off into lots of little ones, which helps the blood get to everywhere, nice and evenly dispersed around the body. So we've got the aorta taking the blood to the body. Once the blood has delivered its oxygen at the body, it needs to make its way back to the heart. So all of these various different pathways and routes and stuff like that, they eventually become one again, lead into one, and that is the vena cava or the vena cava, and that is what is funneling all of the deoxygenated blood back into the heart. Yeah. So again, lots and lots of little channels merging into one major one, which is the vena cava, which we know brings the blood back to the right side of the heart this time, through the valve into the ventricle and out through the pulmonary artery. Yeah, so we've got the pulmonary artery and the pulmonary vein either side of the lungs. And easy way to remember those, anything to do with when you see the word pulmonary, it's to do with the lungs. So it's a nice handy way of remembering where those two go. Yeah, the aorta, biggest artery in the body. Yeah, and the vena cava at the top of at the right side of the heart as well. So those are the main four: pulmonary vein, pulmonary artery, to and from the heart. Then we've got the aorta and the vena cava to and from the body. Yeah. Okay, guys, cool. So that is our little diagram done. That is all the detail that we really need to go into. We don't need to like I say, fill it in like it's in a proper scientific textbook. This is all we need to know, and I feel like this is all we really need to know to again start to think about how our choices can affect our heart. You know, we're talking about these little sort of veins, arteries, and stuff like that that are really important in helping blood flow, circulation. Of course, if we're eating a load of saturated and like trans fats, bad fats, really in our diet, it's really easy for these to get blocked. You know, blockages in the way. So if the fluid is going to squeeze past these blockages, the pressure becomes higher. There's less space in the in the blood vessel. There's less space because of the blockage, so the blood pressure comes up. That of course increases our chances of the likes of strokes and stuff like that due to oxygen not getting where it needs to be. Of course, higher blood pressure in itself. And of course, we've talked about the strength of just having a strong, healthy heart as well, which requires a little bit of exercise, especially cardiovascular, in raising your heart rate and keeping that heart rate up. You know, like we say, if your heart gets used to working at a higher level of intensity, you know, what you were doing 90% of the day, 95% of the day probably becomes so much easier for it to cope with, which takes a lot of strain off it and can take a lot of strain off it anyway. So yeah, we can start to see how our choices either to get exercise and good food or to not get exercise and good food. We can start to picture how those decisions are going to affect our own heart. Yeah, because that is what this is to help us sort of picture. It's our own heart. Nobody else can take care of it for you. We need to take care of it ourselves. And again, you know, you can turn this piece of paper up. You can pick it up, turn it away from you and face it away from you, put it on your chest, and for all intents and purposes, that is what is going on in your chest, which is a little bit mind-blowing in itself to think about, and ultimately a gift, really. You know, it's such a complex system that we take for granted because we don't see it. We don't see how complex it is, and we don't realize the work that it's doing to keep us alive. Until we go to do our first bit of exercise in like 5 years or whatever it might be, and it sounds like it feels like your whole body's going to go on strike and your heart's trying to leave your chest. But yeah, we need to take care of it, guys. Now we can start to visualize and really understand why we need to take care of it as well. Okay, guys, cool. So we've got a little quiz to do, and it's by no means like a test or an exam or anything like that. You can even use that little diagram that we've just done. So if you want to use that little diagram to give you you know, just keep it on hand so you can come back and check anything, and even in the future if you want to just brush up on this knowledge or just check something out, it is always handy to have that paper copy there. Right, guys. Okay, so if you wanted to, you can flip your diagram over and just jot your answers to these 10 questions down on the back of that. If you'd rather get a separate piece of paper, then of course, by all means do. Type answers out on your phone, whatever. If you need to, type them out in the chat if you're watching along live, by all means. But we've got 10 questions. Some of them are a little bit outside the box anyway. I'm not expecting anybody to get 10 out of 10. I'll be amazed if anybody does. Like I say, it's just a little bit of fun and can help us just check where our understanding is with the heart in terms of the stuff that we have looked at so far. So we've got 10 questions. I'll just give everybody a minute to make sure we've got everything that we need, and we'll go from there. Okay, guys, so we've got 10 questions. Away we go. So question 1, how many chambers are in the heart? How many chambers are in the heart? Okay, next question. So we'll check the answers at the end once we've done all 10. Yeah. Again, if you want a little bit more time on this one, just pause it and catch up when you're ready. Okay, what do you call the top 2 chambers of the heart? What do we call the top 2 chambers? Again, use that diagram if you've got it on hand. So the top 2 chambers of the heart, what do we call them? Okay, next question. What do you call the bottom 2 chambers of the heart? Yeah, so the last one was the top 2. What do we call the bottom 2 chambers of the heart? Okay, then next one. So that was the bottom 2 chambers. What prevents the backflow of blood? What prevents blood from flowing backwards in the heart and in our system? Okay, so what prevents the backflow of blood? Next question. What separates the 2 sides of the heart? What separates the left-hand side from the right-hand side? Okay, when blood enters the heart from the lungs, which side of the heart does it enter? So when the blood enters the heart from the lungs, which side of the heart does it enter, or which side of the heart does it go to when blood enters the heart from the lungs? Okay, next question. When blood enters the heart from the body, is the blood oxygenated or deoxygenated? When the blood enters the heart from the body, is the blood oxygenated or deoxygenated? Again, don't be worried about using that your little diagram. What is the job of the largest artery in the body, the aorta? What does it do? In terms of blood flow, what does it do? Next question. How many times does your heart beat in a lifetime? Yeah. 2.5 million, 2.5 billion, or 2.5 trillion? How many times does your heart beat in a lifetime? 2.5 million, 2.5 billion, or 2.5 trillion? If anybody's good at quick maths, think about your average resting heart rate might be about 80 to 100. That's per minute. Just times that by however minutes you're alive for. We've got our answer. On average, though, how many times does your heart beat in a lifetime? And have a little guess if you're not sure. Okay, so last one. At least that one's multiple choice. Have a little guess. And then I think the last question: how many gallons of blood does your heart pump each and every day? 800 gallons, or 1,000 gallons, or 2,000 gallons? In liters, that's about 3,500 liters, 4,500 liters, and 9,000 liters. Yeah, if that helps it at all, thinking about liters. 2 liters is one of them big bottles of pop. Um, how many liters or how many gallons of blood does your heart pump each day? 800 gallons, 1,000 gallons, or 2,000 gallons? What do we think, guys? I'll just give you a minute with that one. Okay, guys, and then we'll go back to the start. And start working our way through those answers. Okay, guys, so how many chambers are there in the heart? If we've used our diagram, hopefully we've been able to see we've got 2 atrium at the top, 2 ventricles at the bottom. We have 4 chambers in the heart. Yeah, 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom, 1 of each either side, of course. What do you call the top 2 chambers of the heart? So the top 2 is the atrium. So we have an atrium on either side. Okay, so the top 2 chambers are atrium. The bottom 2 chambers of the heart were ventricles. Yeah, so atrium at the top, ventricle at the bottom. So the bottom 2 chambers, ventricles. What prevents the backflow of blood is the valves. Yeah, all those little valves that we talked about. There's a lot more than we've mentioned this morning, but yes, those valves that just allow the blood to flow one direction and not and prevent that backflow from happening. So it's valves. Okay, what separates the 2 sides of the heart? we have that thick wall of muscle down the middle of the heart that's called the septum. Yeah, so it's the septum that separates the left-hand side of the heart from the right. Septum for that one. When blood enters the heart from the lungs, which side of the heart does it enter? Yeah, so when blood enters the heart from the lungs, so if we go back to our diagram, blood enters the heart from the lungs, so from the lungs into the heart, it comes into the left side. Yeah, comes into that left-hand side. So when blood enters the heart from the lungs, it comes into the left-hand side, yeah, of the heart. Okay, when blood enters the heart from the body, is the blood oxygenated or deoxygenated? So again, from the heart, enters the heart, sorry, from the body. So it's coming from the body into the heart. Blue is deoxygenated. Yeah. So when it enters from the heart, and when the blood enters the heart from the body, the blood is deoxygenated. It's been to the body, it's dropped off its oxygen, it needs to go back and pick up some fresh oxygen, so it is deoxygenated. Yeah. What is the largest artery in the body? What is the job of the largest artery in the body? The aorta, and that is to carry oxygenated blood from the heart to everywhere else in the body that it needs to be. Again, coming back to this step here, the aorta is carrying all of this oxygenated blood round to the body parts, the muscles, the organs that need it. Yeah, so that is the job of the aorta. Get oxygenated blood from the heart to the body. How many times does your heart beat in a lifetime? Is 2.5 billion. 2.5 billion times your heart may beat in average in a lifetime. And just think, every time that beats, there's pressure in the heart. There's chance for blockage. There's chance for something to go wrong and something to happen. And you think even just generally that wear and tear of 2.5 billion repetitions or times of doing something, you know, it's going to eventually break something down, isn't it? You know, so the easier a time your heart has every time it beats, you know, it may well just last that a little bit longer and longer. So 2.5 billion times in a lifetime your heart may beat. And the last one, how many gallons of blood does your heart pump each day? The answer is 2,000 gallons. So it is C, which translates to 9,000 liters. So think about them 2-liter bottles of pop, 4,500 of them full of blood through the heart every single day. Yeah, this is a piece of equipment. This is a piece of kit that is working non-stop, and it is working hard. Yeah, that is why we need to be thinking about good food choices that are going to help it, as opposed to food choices that are going to hinder it. Yeah. I saw something before that sort of always stuck with me. It doesn't dictate every decision that I make, but it was every time you eat, every choice that you make when it comes to exercise, you tend to be either helping your heart or helping your body fight disease, or you're helping promote disease and potentially illness and stuff like that as well. And I thought that was so amazing. Like there is no stay where I am right now really in the human body in fitness. It's so hard to just stay where you are right now. You tend to be moving forwards or moving backwards. Yeah. A food choice is going to be, if you've got two choices of food in front of you, one is probably going to be better for your body and for your heart than the other. Yeah, it just depends on what choice we make. And that isn't to say we can never have stuff that we know isn't good for the body. It's not all about eating fruit and veg and all of that sort of thing. We need a little bit of enjoyment in our lives as well. I tend to aim for, I like to say 80% nutritious, 20% delicious when it comes to our food. So we've got that little blend and that little mix. So we're able to not be so strict on ourselves. And so we can actually maintain our new behaviors, our new habits. If you're so strict with yourself that whatever you do in exercise or food wise is only going to last a week or two, it's not really any good to you. You need to find something that you can sustain, that you can be consistent with when it comes to our food and when it comes to our exercise as well. It's all about real sort of consistent, lasting change is what we're looking for, guys. Fun little fact just before we do move on. Contrary to previous belief, the heart, a lot of people seem to think that the heart is on the left-hand side of the chest. I think when we're doing the national anthem, we put our hand there. Yeah, if you were probably feeling for your heartbeat, it'd probably be on that side, not the center, and over to the right, you'd probably be around about there somewhere. When really, your heart is central. Your heart sits behind your breastplate, this sternum that we talked about last week when we were looking at the skeleton. Your heart sits behind that for extra protection. The reason that we associate it with the left-hand side is because not only is it slightly tilted to the left, yeah, so the heart isn't completely sat upright, it's tilted to the left, but the left-hand side of the heart is dealing with oxygenated blood. Yeah, it's where the pressure is higher. That left-hand side of the heart beats harder, it contracts, it squeezes harder than the right-hand side. So the feeling, especially if you put your hand and you're trying to feel your pulse or your beat, you feel it more on the left-hand side. Yeah, we feel it more on the left-hand side because that side beats harder. But the heart itself, nice and central. Yeah, behind that sternum. Okay, guys. So we've looked quite a lot at the heart. Yeah, and what happens to the oxygen once it's in your system and then once it's in your blood. But the lungs are a big part of this cardiorespiratory system as well. And no exploration of this area would be complete without looking at the lungs as well. So blood needs to stop off at the lungs to become oxygenated before it goes to the heart to be pumped around the body, just like we mentioned at the start of the session. But how does oxygen go from being inhaled to in your blood and ready to be sent around the body to where it's needed? So we actually have another little journey to follow, really. So after coming in through the nasal passage, yeah, so in our nose or sometimes in our mouth, obviously, we can breathe in through our mouth as well. The air that we breathe in passes through the pharynx, which is this little, the bottom of this little pinky bit, yeah? So this is the pharynx. Passes into the larynx, which is this one here, the purple one, and down into our trachea, which is this here. Yeah, so this is our trachea. This then splits off into two sides and gives us two bronchi. Yeah, so we've got this one coming off this way and this one coming off that way. Although sides are the same. Both sides have both these little branches, which we're going to get to in just a sec, and ribs around the outside as well. I think just for the diagram, we've got one on one side, one on the other, so we can see it nice and clearly. So our oxygen comes in, passes down these airways into our trachea, which then splits off into two, one for each lung, really. We can see looking at the diagram there. So we've got one for each lung. So we've got our bronchi. Then what we have are these little tree-like branches, I guess, really. Yeah, that's what they look like to me. Branches. So these tubes that start off just as one, these bronchi, they divide into thousands of tiny little passageways, which are what these little branches are. Yeah, these little tiny passageways called bronchioles. So we have bronchi, yeah, the two main ones, and then we have bronchioles as they start to break down a little bit and or split off and divide and go their own way a little bit. Yeah, so those are our branches. Now at the end of these branches, we've got little air sacs, and as we breathe in, these air sacs inflate. As we breathe out, these air sacs deflate. Yeah, so these little air sacs are called alveoli. Yeah, so we've got trachea, bronchi, bronchioles, and then at the end of the bronchioles, we have alveoli. Yeah, so there's our little air sacs, and that's where the oxygen goes, which is close enough to the blood flow in the walls of our lungs to allow the oxygen to move across into the bloodstream. Yeah, so the oxygen leaves these and goes into the bloodstream, which just so happens to force carbon dioxide to come the other way. Because although that deoxygenated blood isn't carrying oxygen, it will be carrying carbon dioxide, which needs to make its way out of the body as well. Yeah, we need to get rid of it. So these air sacs become filled with carbon dioxide because the oxygen's gone the other one way and the carbon dioxide's come the other way. It's like an exchange really that goes on. So yeah, these air sacs, as we breathe in, they fill, the oxygen moves across into the bloodstream. Yeah, this is also how carbon dioxide comes back to the lungs and just does that whole system in reverse. Yeah, you know, it goes into these full air sacs, we breathe out, squeeze the lungs down, empty them, and of course these air sacs empty, and the carbon dioxide comes up and out the same way that the oxygen comes in. Yeah, so that is not just how the oxygen comes into the blood, but as also how the blood gets rid of carbon dioxide and where that even comes from in the whole exchange, in the whole system. Yeah. Okay, guys, cool. So that was all we needed to look at really in terms of the cardio respiratory system. And again, we can start to see how, you know, maybe thinking about how things like smoking and stuff like that can be affecting these lungs, these passageways or these air sacs at the end. You know, understanding the body helps us picture how our choices are going to impact it and have an effect on it really. Okay, guys, cool. So just before we wrap up for the day, then let's spin on and finish up the session with a look at these skeletal muscles that I mentioned at the start of the session as well. So our skeletal muscles are essentially the ones that we have direct control over. Yeah, our skeletal muscles are the ones that sit on our bones. They attach to our bones through tendons and allow us to move through signals. Yeah, so if I've got my arm out straight in front of me and I want to bring my hand in towards my shoulder, my brain sends a signal to this bicep to contract. Yeah, and because this muscle is attached to these bones or this part of my arm, as this contracts and gets shorter, this muscle, it brings my hand in. Yeah, to go the other way, that bicep gets longer, but then it's actually the tricep on the back of the arm that's getting shorter. So it's almost like levers and pulleys and you know, to an extent our muscles very similar to like elastic bands, and a little bit of tension in one place will create tension elsewhere and stuff like that. It's our muscles are so directly linked to each other. It's so funny in terms of injuries and pain and stuff like that. I've had clients that have got pain in their shoulder, and it comes from a problem with their calf. You know, they've walked a certain way to put less pressure on their calf, which has then made the calf isn't getting worked, so it's not getting stretched, so it eventually gets shorter, and then your posture changes, and then that pulls this out of position. It's so like a game of pick up sticks sometimes, trying to figure out why you're in pain, because you have to sort of, it's like troubleshooting as well. Sometimes you have to try and figure or rule one thing out and then move on to something else. But like I say, the way that these muscles are so connected is really interesting as well. But these are the muscles that we're going to be looking at, and these are what we call voluntary muscles. Yeah, like we said at the start of the session, the heart is cardiac muscle. It's still muscle, but we don't control it like we do our arms and our legs. You know, the heart beats by itself. It does its own thing, just like our smooth muscle, our organs. We don't tell our stomach to digest food. We don't tell our pancreas to do its job, or its spleen to do its job, or whatever it might be. They're just automated. They are totally involuntary movements, whereas with our skeletal muscles that we're looking at right now, they are voluntary. If I want to put my hand above my head, I can, and it's not just going to happen by accident. That's a very deliberate movement. You know, I'm in control of that. And these muscles also have what we call striations. So they're almost like strands. You can see what direction they're running in. You know, like you can see with like a bit of wood, you can see which way the grain's going. You know, this is the same with our muscles. And only these muscles, our smooth muscle is just what it says on the tin. It's smooth. It doesn't have these marks on it, you know, that indicate which way the fibers run, which way the muscle will stretch. And again, if we understand which way a muscle will stretch and move, we can understand how to work it more effectively. If you look at the chest, you see that the chest muscles, or the pecs, run from central pretty much to the armpit. Yeah. So in order to work this muscle, we need to stretch it so it becomes longer that way. Yeah, the same way that the fibers run. So that's why something like a press up works really well, because obviously my pec is anchored there. As I pull down this way, it stretches across. As I push back up, it contracts again. Yeah, which is why we do a bench press or a push up, to work those muscles there. Yeah, so again, being able to look and see which way a muscle is supposed to move can tell us which way we're meant to move and which way we're not, which can help us avoid injuries as well. So we've got our main muscles that you might see, and these are probably the muscle groups that you might see on machines in the gym. You know, if you go up to a machine, sometimes there's a picture of a little person, and they might have like red areas where you're going to fail this exercise the most, or like yellow where it's not the main muscle that you're going to work, but that area will still work as well. So again, it's handy to have an idea of what's what, not just how they move. You go to a machine and it's called a pec fly or a pec deck. You know, it's handy to know that it's going to work your pecs, and it's a chest machine. So knowing the names of these muscles as well can be really helpful, especially when it gets into an exercise environment. So what we've actually got, so we've got in the pecs. Let's start with the pecs, nice and simple, the one that we were just talking about. So we've got the pecs on the chest. Then we've got next place that makes sense to go. We'll go to the shoulders. We've got delts, or we've got deltoids. So although we're looking at the ones at the front, our deltoids make up pretty much our whole shoulder joint, really. We have a front deltoid, which is what we can see there, or an anterior deltoid. Anterior is the front, and posterior is the back. Yeah, so anterior muscles, we've got our anterior delt, or our front delt. We have a side delt, or a medial delt, or a lateral delt that moves sideways, that does that sort of movement, arms raising up at the side, as opposed to a front raise gets the front part of the shoulder working, that works the side part. So that's a different muscle altogether. And then the back of your shoulder is also a separate muscle, which we can see here. Yeah. So we've got that rear delt as well, which will also stretch and help us pull things, and those sorts of movements where you need the power and the strength to come from the back of the body and from the back of the shoulder. So we have those three deltoids on either shoulder. Yeah, so the shoulders are the delts. Then we have our bicep. Yeah, it was this one here that I mentioned not long ago, which pulls that forearm in. Yeah, that muscle there is the bicep. Tricep is on the back, which we'll get a look at when we look at the posterior side or the back side. So bicep on the front, deltoids in the shoulder, pecs on the chest. Yeah. Then we come down and we meet our abs or our abdominals, which are essentially those six-pack muscles. And we all have them. We do all have them. It's just a case of how visible are they. And truth be told, it doesn't take a large amount of body fat. It doesn't take a high body fat percentage to start to make those abs difficult to see as well. So for all people who will say, I've got no muscles, I've got no abs, anything like that, you do. It's just a case of how strong they are and how, strengthened they are, trained, and how visible they are, if that is something that is important to you as well. Not everybody is. You look at people like powerlifters and strongmen who they get more benefit from eating the extra calories and being stronger, being able to lift the heavy stuff. It wouldn't be worth dieting and dropping weight to the extent that it would require to make those abs visible. So the aesthetic side of it, it's not important to everybody, So again, we will get on the components of fitness later on, so you get a chance to think about what the word fitness actually means to you and what you would like to improve. Some people it is improving your body composition and the aesthetic. Some people it's not. Some people it's much more performance based and just how they feel in themselves and in general. So don't ever get hung up on the fact that I can't see these muscles, this, that, or the other. We do all have them. So we've got our abs down the front of our core. Then we have obliques on the side, which do a lot of sort of like side to side moving. You imagine like if I lean one way, the obliques on this side have to stretch and they contract to bring me back to the start place as well. And then on the legs, really the main one to think about is it's not one muscle, it's a group of muscle that makes up essentially the thigh area or the front thigh area. And it's called the quadricep or quadriceps because it's four separate muscles that we tend to sort of generalize as one. So these are our quadriceps on the front of our legs. And they're responsible for extending the leg at the knee. So if you were sat with bent legs and you wanted to straighten your leg in front of you, it would be these muscles that would shorten and contract and lift the leg up at the knee. It would bend, it would flex, extend the knee upwards, so those are our quadriceps. And those are really the main muscles on the front of the body that we need to think about, really. And then we can flip to the rear side, and on the back we've got this big trapezius muscle at the top. Yeah, so we've got it's almost like a I think of it as a diamond shape in terms of where it attaches to bone, or where it meets the skeleton. So we've got quite out wide on the shoulders, so we can see how these muscles here in our neck, that's what these are, but they run right the way down to essentially halfway down the spine. That's what these muscles here, we can see now that they're going to be responsible for those shoulders coming forward or shoulders coming back as you really push your chest out. All that movement is coming from there. These are the areas, and this is the area where we tend to carry a lot of stress and a lot of tension from our day-to-day life, be it physical or emotional, tends to manifest itself in the traps at some point, which is why if you get a massage, this is one of the areas that they'll probably do in most massages, you know, unless you go for a specialist, I want lower back or I need glutes or lower body or whatever it might be. A lot of general massages will work there, if not even start there, you know. But that is a big muscle. They don't just sit there on your neck. They do come quite low down on your back as well. Yeah. Then we've got our lats or our latissimus dorsi, which sit on our almost like on our back, but on the side as well. So again, if I reach forward for something, this muscle here is going to stretch round the body and forwards a little bit as I reach to create a little bit of extra space at the shoulder, which, you know, helps me reach forward. They'd be responsible for pull-ups. Yeah, if you've ever seen anybody who like they've got that muscle that sticks out there and like tapers down at their waist to a V. That's what those are. Those lats, those latissimus dorsi. I think of them as lats, lateral. They're on the side. Or I think of them as on the side. That's how I've always remembered those. Okay, guys, cool. So we've got our traps. We mentioned our rear delt earlier. As I mentioned before as well, we've got our tricep on the back of our arm that works opposite the bicep. When one shortens, the other one gets longer. When that one gets shorter, the other one gets longer. Yeah, so we have some of these muscles in the body that work kind of almost opposite each other. When one is getting shorter, the other's getting longer. We've got our glutes or our gluteus maximus, which is the single biggest muscle in the body. It's not the biggest muscle group, it's the biggest single muscle. The biggest muscle group is the quadriceps, which explains a lot, really, if you've ever gone heavy on leg day. To be honest, you wouldn't even need to go heavy. You can just feel the difference. Do 10 of them where you're only using this little tiny muscle at the front of your shoulders. Feel how that affects your body. Then do 10 squats. Yeah, and use where you're using all of this muscle all at once. Yeah, because we've just looked at the heart. It ties in really nicely with what we've been talking about, because as we are doing squats and these muscles are working, the demand for oxygen goes up. Yeah, your heart rate is going to speed up. You're going to burn more calories because your body and your heart is working harder because you're using all of this muscle now needs oxygen and not just this little muscle here. Yeah, does that make sense? So you will burn a lot more calories trying to keep up with the demand for oxygen when you are doing big exercises that work a lot of muscle at once. A little exercise that only works a small amount of a muscle isn't going to increase that demand for oxygen very much. Yeah, which isn't going to increase the strain on your heart very much. Which, while we're exercising, is kind of what we're going for, because that's what helps us burn the calories. Yeah, so working a lot of muscle all at once works our body a lot harder than working just a little bit of muscle all at once. Yeah, so that might sound like it makes sense, but you know, it's handy to reflect on that when you're thinking about what your goals are. You know, I've seen people that are trying to burn calories in the gym that are stood doing bicep curls that is only working one muscle there. So I'll say to them, right, instead of doing that, do a pull-up, get your lats involved as well as your rear delts, and still work in your biceps. Then you're working at least triple the amount of muscle all in one go. You're going to be then burning that many extra calories as well. So think about what your goals are. Think about the way that you're exercising and moving. But yeah, when it comes to energy expenditure, working more muscle costs the body more resources. Yeah. Which when it comes to dropping like body fat, that tends to be what we're going for. If you're not sure on the way that you should be exercising for your goals, or, you know, if you're at the gym and you don't really know where to start, by all means, drop me an email, give me a shout. As I mentioned last week, my email is in the description below the video as well. And you may already have it from me emailing out the session links as well. So yeah, please do get in touch if you're on a fitness journey, wanting to start a fitness journey, but you really don't know the best place to start for you. like I say, reach out and let me know. Right, guys. Okay, so we've done the glutes. We looked at the glutes. Your bum muscle, pretty much. We've got our hamstring. So working opposite to the quads. So our quadricep is the front of our thigh. Our hamstring is the back of our thigh. Yeah. So it's these muscles here. Yeah. And then we've got our calf muscles, which are a gastrocnemius is the proper name for our calf muscle. We've got our gastrocnemius there. And that is pretty much all the major muscles on the back of the body as well. Yeah. So if you go into a gym, a lot of exercises will be to, or fitness class even, a lot of exercises will be to stimulate and to challenge one or a mixture of these different muscle groups that we've just talked about, or these different muscles. Because like I say, those are the main ones really. Now, other muscles are going to get worked as a result. You know, these muscles in your forearm get work from holding weights while you're curling them and pressing them and whatever it might be. Yeah. So all those other little muscles get worked as well. But you're not going to go into a gym and find a forearm machine. Yeah, because it's a really little muscle that we don't need to train too hard and can't develop too much really. Right, guys. Okay, cool. So rather than adding any more to that, really, that is a good place to leave it there for today. We will jump across and have a look at the workbook and just see what little bits we're going to be doing over the next week. As always, guys, please don't forget to do the survey, which is in the description. It's not even 30 seconds to fill it in, and it is really important for us, as is your feedback, as always. So next week we're going to be looking at nutrition, how to read food labels, and the benefits and some principles of healthy eating as well. So we can get into that nutrition a little bit more next week. And like I said last week, you're going to have tools that you can use immediately to start impacting and affecting and influencing the way that you're making food choices, especially if you feel as though that's a main area that you need to tackle. Yeah, remember, on a fitness journey, it's baby steps. Don't try and change everything all at once. It'll feel overwhelming. It becomes daunting. It becomes exhausting. It gets boring maybe. Baby steps, little changes. Set yourself up for success. Get a few under your belt and keep moving on. Changing those goals. Set new goals. Don't give yourself something impossible to do from day one, because we don't achieve it and then we talk ourselves out of trying again because we didn't achieve the impossible. You know, it's funny how our own mind works against us sometimes. So yeah, guys, little baby steps. Start on something. If you feel as though you need to address your food first, even then narrow it down a little bit further. What are you going to do? Are you going to try and eat, you know, are you going to cook for yourself 3 nights a week? Yeah. Are you going to try and get some vegetables at each meal? Are you going to try and get some protein at each meal? Are you going to aim for X amount of calories? There's so many different goals. Just set yourself one and you'll have a much easier time of getting there, and then you move on. Yeah. And you're actually training yourself in the way of little successes, I guess. You know, you're setting yourself up to be successful, not to fail. Yeah. Okay, guys, with that in mind, yeah, I just want to jump across and have a look at the workbook. Same one as last week, same workbook as last week. So if you got it last week, obviously you don't need to download it again or anything. If you're missing it from last week, please let me know and I'll get it over to you. So the plan was, right, okay, yeah. So last week we did page 2. Told you to look at page 3 if you could, and do that one as well. If you couldn't, we should be able to do it now. Yeah, we should be able to do it after today's session. The different jobs of muscles in the body as well. Yeah. And so we're matching those up just like we did with the first exercise that we did. Activity 3, we're going to be labeling this diagram of a heart. Looks a little bit more complicated than the one that we drew, but turn your head slightly to the left, and you can see you've got your two chambers at the top and two chambers at the bottom. So all we've got to do there is label them using these four and put them in the right place. Page 4. Page 5 is just a small little quiz. Yeah, so we can answer those questions now. So 8 questions. Look at page 5. We can do page 6 as well, because we've done the we've looked at the lungs, so we can work out where the nasal passage is, what's bronchi, what's bronchioles, where your lung is, and again, go back and use today's session if you need to. You can go back and always check that session link, and like I say, just go back and re-watch it, even if you only sort of scroll through and look for certain bits. We've got a small quiz to do with the lungs, that we should be able to do after today's session as well. That was page 7, and then I think the last one to do is page, yeah, it's page 8. So the last page to do is page 8. What is the main function of the heart? What is the main function of the lungs? Yeah, that's page 8, done and dusted. And then activity 6 we will be moving on to next week, as we start to look at nutrition and healthy diet a little bit more. Yeah, so just up to page 8 for now. Yeah, just up to page 8 for now. If again, if you have any problems, let me know. But definitely go back and watch any of the sessions that links into what it is that you're looking for as well, because you know, you might be able to just quickly nip back to a slide or part of a presentation and be able to get that answer nice and quick. Yeah, so that is the that's the last thing to do today, or to get done before next week, really. Like I say, we will be back next Wednesday at the same time, and we're going to be looking at nutrition and healthy eating, and of course the many benefits of that. Don't forget to check out today's fitness video as well. Even if you come back to it later on in the week and you want to, yeah, if you want to come back to it later on in the week and give it a go, check it out. I've picked a chair-based exercise session for this week to build on. You know, last week maybe we were stretching and getting moving again. This ups that intensity a little bit, but everything we can still do from a seated position. So whether that's injuries or balance or space that might be a barrier, we're already looking at reducing them and finding a way around them. Yeah, like I mentioned last week, there's lots of different workouts in that YouTube playlist. So follow that link, it'll take you to the playlist, and you can pick whatever workout you're feeling for today. If you don't want to do chair-based stuff, if you didn't want to stretch last week, you can go on, you can look at abs workouts, legs and bum, whatever it might be. Go on and have a look. There's a little bit of something on there for everybody. And I always try to offer alternatives if something's a little bit too tough, or giving you a little bit of pain or something like that. So yeah, definitely check out today's fitness video. Please don't forget to do that survey, guys. Reach out to me if you need me. I'm just an email away. Of course, you could always get in touch with one of the guys in the office, and of course they'll pass the message on as well. Like I say, we will be back next week for session 3. In the meantime, stick into those workbooks. Stay safe, look after yourself and those around you, and we will be back next Wednesday to keep this ball rolling. Until then, guys, take care. Thanks for logging in this morning. Thanks for learning with Media Savvy and spending your time with me this Wednesday morning. Take care, guys. I'll see everybody next week.